You are living through something that has never happened before in the entire history of your species. Not war, not plague, not famine. Something quieter and stranger than any of those. For the first time in 300,000 years, the most comfortable, the most educated, the most medically advanced, the most materially secure generation of human beings ever to exist is also the generation least likely to reproduce. Not because they can't, because they are choosing not to. And the question that nobody is asking loudly enough is this: what is happening inside the brain that could override one of the deepest biological drives the human species has ever carried? The answer is not what you think. It is not selfishness. It is not laziness. It is not the collapse of values or the rise of individualism or the failure of some generation to grow up. It is what happens when a brain built for one world finds itself living in a completely different one. Start with what evolutionary biologists and reproductive psychologists have long understood. The drive to reproduce is not a conscious decision. It is not something you choose the way you choose a career or a city. It is one of the deepest motivational systems embedded in the human brain, hardwired by millions of years of natural selection. Every ancestor you have ever had reproduced. You are, in the most literal biological sense, the living product of an unbroken chain of beings who were motivated enough, driven enough, compelled enough to reproduce under conditions that make modern life look effortless. Ice ages, famine, predators, disease, constant physical danger, and they still reproduced because the drive was stronger than the obstacle. So, what changed? Psychologist Jean Twenge, whose research at San Diego State University has tracked generational shifts in values, mental health, and life choices across decades, argues that the answer lies not in what people want but in what they expect. The brain does not evaluate reproduction in a vacuum. It evaluates it in context. And the context of modern life has changed the calculation so dramatically that the ancient drive is being overridden, not by indifference, but by a specific kind of psychological mathematics that your ancestors never had to perform. In the ancient world, the opportunity cost of having children was almost non-existent. There was no alternative path. There was no career to prioritize, no identity to protect, no apartment to keep tidy, no decade of educational debt to pay off before you could afford stability. The brain did not weigh having children against other options because there were no other options with comparable neurological weight. Children were simply what happened, what the body did, what the community expected, what survival required. The modern brain runs a different calculation entirely. It is surrounded by alternatives. Every choice not to have a child is also a choice for something else. A choice for freedom, for experience, for financial independence, for the kind of self-actualization that previous generations simply did not have access to. And the brain, built to seek reward and avoid cost, is increasingly finding that the modern alternatives to reproduction activate its reward systems more immediately, more reliably, and with far less risk than children do now. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge, whose work on the brain's wanting and liking systems at the University of Michigan has reshaped how psychologists understand motivation, draws a crucial distinction between desire and enjoyment. The brain has two separate systems for reward, one that generates wanting, the drive towards something, the anticipation, the craving, and one that generates liking, the actual pleasure of having it. These systems can become decoupled. You can want something intensely that you don't actually enjoy very much, and you can enjoy something deeply that you never wanted in the first place. Modern life is extraordinarily good at generating wanting. Social media, streaming, consumer culture. The endless feed of experiences, products, lifestyles, and identities available for consumption creates a wanting system that runs almost continuously. The brain is perpetually activated in anticipation of the next thing, the next experience, the next achievement, the next version of the self. And in that environment, the slower, quieter, more complex reward of raising a child, a reward that takes years to materialize, that is frequently exhausting, that involves sustained sacrifice with uncertain outcomes, struggles to compete at the level of wanting. The children who were born to previous generations were not born into a world that offered their parents this competition. Their parents' brains did not have an infinite menu of alternative rewards. The wanting system had far fewer targets. and reproduction, surrounded by social expectation, biological imperative, and community reinforcement, occupied a central place in it. This is not a moral judgment. It is a neurological one. The brain that is surrounded by immediate, reliable, low-cost rewards will find it harder to sustain motivation for deferred, uncertain, high-cost rewards, even when those high-cost rewards are, by most measures, among the most meaningful experiences a human life can contain. The research on parental well-being is genuinely complex. Studies consistently show that parents report lower moment-to-moment happiness than non-parents, more stress, more anxiety, more cognitive load, and simultaneously, parents consistently report higher meaning, higher sense of purpose, and higher overall life satisfaction over the long term. The brain knows, at some level, the difference between pleasure and meaning, but in the moment of decision, pleasure speaks louder. There is also the role of what psychologist Barry Schwartz famously called the paradox of choice. When options multiply, satisfaction decreases. The more alternatives available, the more any single choice feels like a potential mistake. The more paths not taken haunt the path you did take. For most of human history, the path of reproduction was not a choice in any meaningful sense. It was the default. There was no haunting alternative because there was no alternative. The modern brain, presented with an effectively infinite number of life paths, experiences the weight of every unchosen road, and a road as permanent, as demanding, and as identity-transforming as parenthood carries more perceived risk in that calculus than at any previous point in human history. Psychologist Seligman's research on learned helplessness and its descendants in positive psychology also points to something important here. The sense of agency, the belief that your choices matter, that your life is something you are authoring rather than something happening to you, has become a central organizing value of modern psychological life in a way it simply wasn't for previous generations. And parenthood, whatever its rewards, involves a profound and permanent surrender of agency. The child's needs will override your preferences. For decades, your schedule, your sleep, your body, your attention, your finances, and your identity will be reshaped by someone else's requirements. For a brain that has been cultivated to prize individual agency above almost everything else, that surrender is not just inconvenient. It is neurologically threatening. None of this means that the people who are choosing not to have children are making the wrong choice. This is not a video about what people should do. It is a video about what is happening inside the brain that is producing outcomes that have never occurred before in human history. A species that survived ice ages and pandemics and everything the natural world could devise is now, in its most comfortable and capable moment, producing fewer offspring than at almost any previous point in its existence. Not because of external threat, because the internal signals have changed. The ancient brain was surrounded by a world that made reproduction the path of least neurological resistance. The modern brain is surrounded by a world that makes everything else easier. Not because modern people are less driven, less capable, or less human than their ancestors, but because the environment has changed in ways that the brain's ancient architecture was never designed to navigate. The wanting system is full, the alternatives are abundant, the cost of commitment has never felt higher. And the reward of meaning, which is what children ultimately deliver in study after study across culture after culture, is a reward the brain struggles to anticipate accurately from the outside. You cannot fully imagine what it is like to love someone who did not exist before you made them. The brain has no template for it, no preview, no sample. It can model careers and travel and relationships from existing experience, but it cannot model parenthood from the outside. And in a world that runs increasingly on the preview, on the try before you buy, on the instant signal of whether something will be good, the unreviewable, unpreviewable, irrevocable nature of having a child sits at an impossible disadvantage.